Wonderful. Thanks everybody for being part of this wonderful human-centered AI Masters webinar series. So I am extremely excited and thrilled to have two wonderful scientists with me and also my colleagues from BME University in Hungary, in Budapest. And they are Péter ANTAL and Mihály HÉDER. These two gentlemen are wonderful experts, and I've been having conversations with them in the last couple of weeks. And it's so enriching that I almost felt that I should be, getting to introduce you all to these two wonderful gentlemen. So let's start with Péter. Péter, tell us a little bit about yourself, please.
Hello, thank you for the invitation. So my research area is is the integration of knowledge and data. How can we incorporate our prior knowledge into machine learning systems? And we would like to do it in large scale, perhaps even supporting scientific discovery, automate it as much as possible. We mainly do it in biology, but we are using general AI techniques. So I'm excited to discuss that. How can we utilize various aspects of this technology?
Absolutely. And I'm also looking forward to delivering these wonderful lectures for our human-centered AI Masters together with you gentlemen. Mihály, tell us a little bit about yourself. I know you're coming from a very different space, right? I mean, I know Péter is like a statistician, hardcore mathematician.
Yeah, in that case, I'm very different. By no means I am a hardcore mathematician. I think I'm a philosopher. I'm also a computer scientist, so I'm not very far from what Péter is. And my specialty is the philosophy of AI, and I used to work on epistemology, but nowadays much more on the ethics of AI. This is what I teach also here at the Budapest University of Technology Economics. And we have various projects like this wonderful human-centered AI Masters project.
Awesome. Did you know that Jeff Hinton is also a philosopher? He did his, I think, he did his PhD, I think, from Edinburgh.
But I did not.
Yes, he as well. So I think, and that's why his his reasoning tends to be a little bit always driven by motivations, and obviously he's also a great mathematician. So it's wonderful to have that great combination. So just for the rest of the audience, these human-centered AI webinar series are driven to give you guys a perspective of the AI Masters program that we are going to be developing and delivering and eventually releasing to a wider population of European residents who can follow this master's program once this 3-year-long project has concluded. The foundation of this project is based on having, I would almost say, like a quadrilateral kind of a junction. So there is an Italian university at the bottom, and then you have Dublin a little bit. I would say it's not an exact quadrilateral. It's kind of like a tilted quadrilateral in Dublin. Then on the other side you have the Netherlands, and on the right hand side you have Hungary. So in a way, I really think that, I personally think, and of course I'm biased because we are also participating in this wonderful program. I really think that we will be really able to develop one of the most cutting edge AI Masters program that is designed to help you make professionals with this master's program that carries 60 ECTS points to look, introspect, and to perhaps even interrogate the design of these AI systems from the lens of humanity, human-centered, and also ethics. So, having that out of the way, let's jump into some interesting questions around, a few things that we kind of came up with to help you guys understand and get you, participate with us as well. Do keep asking questions as well, by the way. If you have questions, I will post these questions, and any highs and hellos, very happy to receive that. I can put it in StreamYard, and your question is going to just come under this bar, and that helps Péter and Mihály to answer these questions for you. So post questions as much and as you guys can, and I will address these questions. So keep doing that in between. No need to wait. You can ask questions, and I will help Péter and Mihály answer these questions for you. Okay, so now let's get a little bit into the details of this, this discussion. So, the key topic of this webinar is trustworthy AI, right? And so I had a chat with Péter and Mihály. We sent emails back and forth, and we said, we need to kind of have a balanced approach, but we should still keep asking hard questions. So my first question is, a mathematical approach that is based on logical and probabilistic provability is something that is lacking in many systems, because obviously the creators of these AI solutions are not interested in proving or sort of interrogating these systems. So Péter, what is your view in terms of obviously the mathematics, the fundamental mathematics and the transformations, the affine transformations that we use in machine and deep learning is what makes AI nice and exciting, face recognition or NLP. But can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, I'm happy to start with this easy part and leave the evolution of this idea later to Mihály, perhaps. So the original idea was that we write a program, then we can prove and test it. So we can prove its correctness, and we can prove that it satisfies all the requirements formalized in a specification, and we can even design a randomized test for it. So either logically or using some stochastic scheme, we can prove that it's really trustable. This tool is like a standard engineering tool is trustable. But unfortunately, the scalability of this approach is really the question. So we can do it for simple programs. We can do it for simple function classes in a sense. So it was realized in the 90s that the statistical approach, where we can specify the necessary sample size for statistically proving that something is probably correct. So the famous probably approximately correct approach, which allows us to calculate the necessary sample size for a given problem, or at least for a given method and problem, unfortunately is not that scalable. And both the logical approach to test a large-scale expert system back to the 80s and the 90s, and later to prove statistically that a certain deep neural network is really working, was not tractable. So the computational complexity and the statistical complexity, I mean the sample size, was astronomical, and this brings in the second stage. So I would propose to discuss what can we do if these approaches are not applicable for the most interesting solutions, what we are looking for.
Yeah, I think, probabilistic provability in itself is a misnomer. I mean, even a flip of a coin, each time it's a 50% probability, but each time you will not be able to predict which part of that 50%. And this is the most basic sort of, coin flip that we can design. And no matter, and then the probability is if you, flip a coin 50,000 times, and if 99.99% times it was head, you can still not prove its probabilistic, let's say, I wouldn't say if you can hold that system accountable, but it's difficult. But again, Mihály, what do you think about this? I mean, I know, and Péter gave a wonderful sort of technical explanation, and also the questions that arise from it. But what is the key question that comes to your mind? Like,
Yeah, well, I always put things into the big picture context, and so in this case, my big picture would be, well, society kind of recognizes that AI is coming, and that is a very potent technology, and that's fair. I mean, we could agree with that. It's a huge potential, and of course, for doing good and also for doing bad. So that's fair that there is an awareness, justified awareness and wariness of the coming AI, and so all of the subsystems of society you can think about engineering organizations like IEEE or the EU or some chapters of the EU. Start thinking on how to handle this. So there is this feeling of oncoming wave of AI, and then we should do something about it, because in the past we have been not so great at regulating technology soon enough so that it doesn't get too terrible.
Yeah.
And what they do is that they try to, I mean, the first wave of thinking is about some certain values, or I could even say virtues. And one of the virtues is trustworthiness, is what the European high-level expert group finds. So this is why it's called ethical guidelines for trustworthy AI or something like that. And so this trustworthiness is supposed to encapsulate what we expect from such a system that is driven by AI. But then the problem is that there is a gap, which is called like implementation gap. So you have this virtue, okay, it should be trustworthy. Maybe we are not really clear on what that exactly means, but we are certainly not exactly clear on how to code that or how to realize that in a system. And so what happens is that for different reasons, you had these formal methods in engineering from way before. So in software, they call it formal methods or provability. And then this is what you have. So there is a need that is arising from the wave of AI, and there is a tool set that has already been there. So it's a pre-existing option that you could use. And then you see if you can match the two things. And the immediate problem is that, well, maybe this trustworthiness that the society as a whole, if you can even think of such an entity, has in mind, is something different. So because they may want the system not to overstep its boundaries and predefine specifications, but also it has like this soft requirement, like it should be nice and benevolent and be on my side as a user and not on the side of a producer. And mathematical provability on itself, it could just ensure that the system is like, I don't know, exploiting its users as it's supposed to, according to its owners or something like that. So it's volume neutral, really. It's a technique that you can apply.
Okay, but again, you touched, Péter, do you have anything to add to Michi? I
Yes,
have flags raising in my head about autonomy and my information, my data, my life, maybe my soul, the deep thoughts that I have that are emerging through my expressions on the internet. I think I know they are mine, right?
So I think another factor which is challenging for this formal approach for probability, either using logical or statistical approach, is that AI methods are more and more at mass scale. So we would like to prove that if we apply them at scale, so really not just an individual, but if the population starts to use them, then still we have some trust in them, and we know that how they work and what will be their effect. So just to give you an example, so if we design a root finding problem, which is back to the dawn of AI into the 50s or 60s. So root finding problem is very nice application. We apply it constantly in our everyday life. But if many people applies it at the same time without some synchronization, then it immediately can create a huge problem, just directing all the traffic flow in a certain direction, and it creates a huge traffic jam. So even with this trivial example, not to mention all the most complicated problem in politics and in the society, that if we use simple scoring systems, giving indications of our preferences, how this explicit representation of our preferences can lead to distortion, addiction, and serious mental diseases even. So this is an immediate challenge that we cannot predict. That even if we have a very simple mathematical rule set, perhaps the life game, so the game of life from Conway. So even in this very simple scenario, we cannot predict the emergence of very simple tools, rules, and this is what we see from time to time, that how can we catch and how can we ensure that the society has access to this generated emergent data, how the individuals can learn from this data. So if we are talk about attention economy and preference economy, where these huge companies has direct access to millions, hundreds of millions of people, and they can learn better psychological model than they ever dreamed of, then what's the reason that they don't share it with us? I mean, the results, that would be a very nice and scientific approach. So it would be a minimum requirement that we can learn from this large-scale data, what we collected about mankind. So shortly, I think another very complicated challenge that the AI tools now used at mass scale, and this mass usage is another challenge, and we have to somehow ensure that that these tools and their results, I mean the data, can be properly used for the society.
Yeah, I think it's wonderful. So I'm just trying to carve this into the next sort of question. So I know that in European Union and also within US, at least the state of California, are already imposing laws. For example, they've banned face recognition. And while that approach, and to be very honest, I'm a pro technology person. Obviously, I'm definitely not pro of non-consensual use of information or anything. It's like asking, you need to ask people permission if you take picture inside an open area. So I do understand the difference between when it's right to use technology, it saves us time. It makes things much, much easier for us to work faster than our ancestors used to do 100 years ago, 150 years ago. So what is the right model in order to add that? And that question is probably Michi, but Péter, you can also add later. The right legal approach where we can have accountability and responsibility measured in a way that continues to accept, because we all enjoy the benefits of technology. Let's be honest. We don't want to be thrown into the dark ages where I go back to horse and carriage. Coming to work takes like 2 hours. I slog for 2 hours to work, and then 6 hours again, I'm stuck in traffic or something else. I want my life to be better. That's why we love technology. So what are the key elements in the legal approach that can make this AI resurgence accountable and responsible?
Yeah, so you asked what is the right approach, which is a tall order, but I'm trying to do my best to answer that. So I would say, at least to my priority, so this is all up for debate, but my priority would be, and that's, by the way, reflected, so others must be thinking the same because it's reflected in various documents that are authoritative, that it should work for everyone. And by that, I mean that more technically savvy people tend to forget that there is a huge barrier to accessing any kind of technology right on the user interface. And so what I'm trying to say is that, going back to the question of accountability and trustworthiness, is that, as Péter very aptly captured, the fact that you can maybe investigate sometimes, given that the complexity is such and everything else works out, a system in isolation. However, you need the system to work in context, and so you would need to somehow verify that in this holistic picture everything is right, that for which you may not have any sort of mathematical method to, right? And so the model, so the holistic picture of in which an AI is placed should include people who would never ever before did any AI, and not decided by people whose profession is AI. I mean, exactly. If you are savvy on with internet, for instance, then you're already privileged because you're technologically savvy, and based on that privilege, you derive additional privileges. Like that's the Matthew effect. Sometimes they call it like that, right? So is that you're already good, and then now you have even more privileges. And people who couldn't use the primary technology in the first place won't be able to use the next version, or even less. And so with AI, going back, when I say it should work for everybody, when we talk about transparency or we talk about accountability, we shouldn't have something in mind that, I am so Mishi, I used to, I don't know, compile my own Linux kernel. So now I'm that kind of technical level. So now I'm interested in a GitHub link to this AI, so that for myself, I can investigate what's going on, because that's very particular to like an elevated set of knowledge about technology. And it's not really transparency, because it's not transparent for like a large chunk of the population. So we should switch into more like a social scientist and anthropologist mode and investigate what is a technology, for instance, that everybody can use. So you can find technologies in Europe that is almost universally adopted, and those will be very simple stuff like the internet to some extent, mobile phones even more, maybe social networking and email, and then not much beyond that. And if you know that in a search engine you can do double quotes and then you search for the whole term, not just the words in separation, that you are an advanced user already. Mm-hmm. So I would be interested in finding methods for transparency and trustworthiness in general, or accountability in particular, that are that you can show that it has some meaning to anybody, really anybody, and not build some system that is for the geeky types like us and benefits us more.
Yeah. Mishi, you're a philosopher. Maybe I'll ask another question, because I'm sure, as a philosopher, you also see how trends transcend over time. I'm not sure if you heard of Nikolai Kondratiev. Have you heard of that name?
No, unfortunately not.
Kondratiev had this, I probably try to see if I can share, I'll share a screen. Let me quickly see, share. Just wanted to kind of, so I hope you can see this. And it's very interesting. Kondratiev had this he spoke about industrial revolutions. So I'll probably open something that is a little bit more, something which people can, this one. So I hope you guys can see the screen.
Yes.
So as you can see, these are all variations. People have used Kondratiev's 50-year. So he kind of predicted like 50-year cycles, how things start emerging. And now I know, Mishi, you just mentioned, well, the ones who are not as savvy are the ones should be made aware. But if I look at historically, look at the water power, steam power. When electric power came, all the people with steam power lost jobs. I don't know historically if people were really concerned about, we should try to help the people from steam power and teach them electric power. And when the combustion power came, electric got disadvantaged. So you can also, and again, I'm just now being philosophical. So these are transformations that happen over a certain period of time. I'm not saying, I'm not trying to provide an existentialistic sort of, musing that, we cannot help it. Technology happens. What I do think is that the previous sort of transformations were transformations in technology in terms of how we could get better. Jobs also got displaced. But in this, when you start looking from 1973 all the way to 2008, you're looking that we are kind of stuck in this communication in IT and ITC, information and technology continuum. It almost seems as if it's kind of, we're kind of becoming, it's becoming our Achilles heel. We don't know anymore if the knowledge and algorithms in this case is going to help it's definitely is helping the wealthier get wealthier because they're able to understand, like you said, the ones who are privileged are getting more privileges naturally. And we can also say that, well, listen, I mean, this is the new world, and too bad for those who are not able to understand, because historically there is no evidence that people took a lot of care to look at the ones when the people with jobs and skills, the families that lost jobs, who were skilled in steam power when electric power came into existence. So the question is then, and perhaps I don't know, Péter, you can also jump in. Do you think, I'll just stop sharing. Do you think are we worrying too much about the have-nots, and should we just say, okay, they have to pick up? We obviously should make it easier for them to onboard into the digital economy.
Well, I think the concerns are well founded, because if you check this earlier figure, so thanks for it, it's really a very illuminating figure. So if you check the technologies, for example, the water power supplied tools. So definitely we learned about. We can use this knowledge to learn something new about humans, the blood system, and then or the vessels, or the electrical engineering. Definitely is very useful to understand all the electrophysiological processes in the brain. But AI is different, because it gives us tools which directly provide access to understand ourselves, and this knowledge, and this data, if not handled properly, is dangerous. So in short, I think AI tools has this catalytic effect. So they are not just one shot, but if we use them, we generate data and or knowledge about ourselves, particularly at the level of the society, at the level of mankind, not at the level of a single individual, is far more useful. And that's the reason that we have to be more careful than with any previous technology, because the data what we generate, the knowledge what we generate is totally different than the earlier technologies.
Yeah. What do you think, Michi? I know this question was more specific towards, transforming technologies displace jobs. That's for sure. It's happening very rapidly as more and more work is getting digital. So I agree with you. I totally agree with you, and also with you, Péter, that yes, it's different. It's not like, it's not steam power. So the whole industry shifts. There's a lot of effort taken. Right now, the problem is indeed that you just are flipping switches. You're adding a bunch of algorithms. In fact, AI is also able to generate algorithms, with certain modifications to suddenly radically change the direction how a company will behave. It happens at a flip second, maybe a couple of weeks, the way these machine learning pipelines are organized. So it's becoming a bit surreptitious. At least it's becoming a little bit hidden, so you don't know what's happening at the back end, and suddenly the direction changes. So Michi, once again, because I raised the question based on your explanation. So the right path, do you agree with Péter?
Yeah, so switching back to your original question about, people whose inventions were catalytic to the industrial revolutions traditionally were not aware of the society transforming power they have, and then they did not face the responsibility that is as high accordingly. So this is what we saw. But then, of course, we are not at all bound to repeat that. But that's just a value choice. I'm saying, well, we should do differently, but then you may say, well, maybe not, or maybe we can't. But then, so let me give you another angle, and it's that if you to that figure, you also put the population growth, you will realize that was like completely a parallel process. So there's like electricity, steam engine is a tide, or even more agricultural breakthroughs are a tide that lifts everybody's boats. That's just way more humans on the planet. And then what if we can't do that anymore? I mean, maybe we left behind some millions of people in an earlier, I mean, the age at the time, when things become electric, and then some people were left out or something like that. And by current standards, that's like not a big portion of our current 7 billion plus population. But at the time, that would have been a much bigger portion of the current population. And so you should extrapolate those who are kind of left behind, or, well, maybe we do our best, and then if they still lagging behind, then that's on them. So that would be maybe billions of people today, which was like the entire population back then. Correct. So I don't know that you can think of these things just proportionally and not in absolute terms.
I agree.
So several, we are at a junction in which we can't do this well. New technology lifts all of the boats. Like, these were like sources of energy or food, right? Electricity, steam power, maybe sources of housing, so that you can build levels and not like be flat in the city, and then you achieve bigger population density, and that's beneficial for several reasons, not for virus reasons, of course. But anyway, so you can't do that anymore. So just without thinking about AI, any new this kind of technology is not able to lift the population's well-being and the sheer numbers anymore. So our options to more well-being should be being more optimal in everything that we do, and not just outgrow our current situation anymore.
Exactly. I mean, growth and maximizing growth, maximizing shareholder value is what is driving current economies. I was just trying to play the devil's advocate. I'm not saying that in the boardrooms of these technology companies today, people are as brash. I know there are some large social media companies who literally made statements in their, sometimes it leaks to the press, where they said, leave that certain demography. I will not name that country, which has 1 billion or more people. Oh, they are poor people. We don't need to put our software there. Those kind of brash statements, you're absolutely right. 1 billion citizens in a country used to be the global population back then. And I totally agree with you that this is, the consequences proportionally are dramatic, and they're multifold as well. Okay, so we kind of, visited the mathematical part. We visited the legal accountability, provability part. And yes, I understand it's not something the three of us will be able to solve this today for the rest of the Europe or maybe the rest of the world. But I am very optimistic. I am genuinely optimistic. And as I mentioned at the beginning, engineering sort of solutions is where we are hoping that eventually, I don't think European Commission wants a war with US companies. Neither do US companies want to be continuing to work in a predatory fashion. As you know, all these technology companies are also looking inside themselves. They are introspecting, they're thinking, how do we sort of improve ourselves? So looking and being a naive and a well-meaning person, I would say, well, we all together want to make this understandable, accountable, provable, right? So the last question, and perhaps then we'll try to figure out and take a question. I know there's one question here. Monica has asked a wonderful question. I will post that immediately. So is there an ethical engineering approach possible in order to provide some form of transparency, explainability, understandability throughout the development of this AI system? I'll start with Péter, and then and Michi, could you please add after Péter's comments?
So partly reflecting on this question, have you shared it? So the question, should I read? Or?
Yes, the third question was indeed the ethical engineering approach aiming for transparency and understandability.
No, I mean, I'm from a user. Okay, so it's about.
I'll share it in a few minutes. Yeah.
Okay, so anyway, that can we utilize AI to preserve privacy? I think the ethical aspect is somewhat just the opposite. So if we use privacy-preserving techniques, then we can offer for the population a way to collect more data, more detailed data, and in this way, each individual can learn much better about herself, himself, and our understanding of ourselves will be deeper and better. So I think privacy preserving techniques are really the key, and in this new economy, that to boost AI further, we need more data, and this data can come from trustable techniques. Where we can prove the sources of the data, we can guarantee that a certain aspect of the data will be not used, but we can access it at higher level. So if we can design properly this trustworthy data collection system where we have AI solutions at many aspects. For example, just a very simple example, if you would like to understand finally the effect of diet on various aspects, how to do diet optimally, imagine that anybody who is interested in this question could collect safely some deep personal data and analyze it together at European level, for example, evaluating all the various dietary and environmental effects altogether. Immediately, we could increase the sample size in the statistical question, and we could learn a lot at population level. But to achieve it, of course, we have to guarantee for the participants that their private life will be respected, and the data is used properly. So this is a challenge, and the ethics of this concrete system is a very complicated and multifaceted problem.
Yeah, Mishi, what does the philosopher think of this?
Yeah, well, I'm actually quite optimistic, and my optimism is based on the students I meet who are very much aware of the possible consequences of any kind of technological breakthrough, and for good reason. I mean, they are worried about, for instance, climate change, and then, of course, the whole story is for them is that where we are in a situation not really caused by us because we are just too young to have been much of a factor in that, and then what we have to solve it. So that's like a cautionary tale for the responsibility of like complete industries. Population as a whole. So they are very interested in anything that we can, but I mean really anything that we can say that's useful for them, and they will be there and listen. And I base my optimism on that. So that is a whole precondition of our enterprise, and the very fact that we have this webinar here in the project, it just shows that, right? But then, of course, this doesn't rely on how can we do that, and well. We have several means for, I would say, several layers to talk about transparency. So, for instance, for humans, we don't really have much. So there's a black box of that's a black box of what's going on in your head, really. Apart from what I can tell from sitting here. But for instance, we have just a very simple thing like a scoring system for Airbnb owners or hosts. And then that's a level of transparency. It's not something that AI people think about as a transparency as in I understand the process. So there is process and outcome transparency. This is an example of outcome transparency. So that I have 5 stars and 500 people stayed at my accommodation, and this is something that this firm did so that people have some sort of information. And AI, maybe I can't judge if it's doing its job well because, for instance, I'm using a translation software. I can't tell because I don't speak the language in question if the outcome is good enough. But if everybody else is saying it is, then I will trust the system. But the precondition of that is information should be shared. I would say experiences should be shared about AI systems. And in order to do that, you have to, for instance, not hide the fact that, well, this is the same system employed at this company that is employed at another company somewhere. So because you can rebrand, you can use white label stuff. And that's like, I'm just telling you one example, which is not really technical, it's managerial, of how can you maintain one AI solution's public image in a sense that it's understandable. Well, this was the same system, maybe 2 versions before that did that not so good thing, but now we fix it, and we are not just rebranding everything all the time, and and our users can share their experiences. So that's like a very basic level. And of course, you can go on from that to the actual more technical approaches to transparency.
Yeah, I think the interpretability, before we start talking about portability, reusability, or transferability of systems, has also definitely proven in many occasions that if you, for instance, we in our research lab, we do projects in healthcare. So I know there are 2 lines of thinking that is kind of creating a challenge in the domain experts world. One line of thinking is that, for instance, if you are using an algorithm, you developed an algorithm, and we've seen that. So, for example, the moles on your skin, the black moles which babies are born with, and we tend to develop moles around the body. All humans have that. To detect cancer on that mole. So basically lesions, essentially. And the algorithm was initially created on the surface, for skin surface. There is a company in the Netherlands, it's led by a former Philips healthcare CEO. And they collected large quantities of data. And eventually, what we realized is that the scientists that are thinking, because the algorithm knows what it's looking for, we can also use the similar algorithms to start understanding the pathology. And when I say pathology, going into pathological slides at tissue level, at cell level, cellular level. And the surprising thing is this: when they transferred this to, let's say, looking for tissue, breast cancer or liver or bladder cancer, these algorithms were performing pretty okay. And that raised a flag inside my head. So in how much can be, again, it comes all the probabilistic reasoning on one side, Péter. The provability seems to suggest that, oh, well, it's finding the pixels, it's trying to do the same job only in a different domain within the same healthcare umbrella. And this is just an interpretation which seems to work for scientists. So they think, well, one size fit all, we can take it. So I think these debates are constantly creating sort of kind of confusion in our head, because at one end, even the pathologists are surprised and shocked. They're saying, it does work. Yes, we took the tissue sample, we used all the machines, that microscopic images, and we can see that it did identify lesions. It did identify cancerous cells versus non-cancerous cells in different domains. So this transferability is creating confusion in the minds of domain experts, meaning healthcare people who have learned this, medical doctors, and as an art. And the technologists, which are all these startups that are coming up with these solutions, are saying, well, take it and test it. I'm not saying that I'm an expert. And it's very difficult for all these domain experts to let's say argue against its use, because it is still working. So those kind of things, obviously, I understand in this, it has to go through certification. You have to have clinical FDA clearance or SFDA clearance in healthcare domain. But there is no sense of clearance, like you just mentioned examples of Airbnb. But I'll stop here because I know this is a fantastic discussion. I would want you guys to answer this question which Monica has asked. Perhaps starting with Péter, and then Mishi's also view on this. I know it's again a broad question, but if you could quantify this in a few sentences. In the meanwhile, I'll just plug my power cable to the laptop. So while you guys answer the question, please go ahead.
Okay, so in a sense, I would like to continue my earlier explanation that in my interpretation, the key to to deepen our knowledge about the human behavior and even the physiology and treatability and even in drug discovery. To collect more data, we need privacy preserving techniques, and we need data security to ensure that the data what we collect is really coming from a certain trustable source. And if we have this data and we invent proper incentives for the participants, micropayment and various schemes that we really arrange and organize properly that the participants are sharing trustable data and useful data, then we can build up and extend our current AI systems. So in a sense, we can really shift the focus further, because in the beginning, AI was focusing on a single individual, on a single individual mind. How can we emulate various aspects, let's say, cognitive thinking and logical reasoning and so on and so forth. But currently, we use AI systems at distributed level and for complicated problems. And to proceed with this, we would like to collect data at population level. And that's the reason that I think privacy is the key, but not vice versa.
Yeah. So the user is asking if we can somehow with AI facilitate dealing with data privacy, more confidence in technology, and I think we certainly can. And I'm coming from a completely different angle here. It's that I truly believe that most companies are not evil, most companies are not even reckless or careless, but it seems to me, I don't know about anybody else's view on this, but it's like for some bureaucratic processes, it's just we have a lack of manpower. And so if you look at the original definition of AI, or one of the more canonized definitions of AI, that would be, well, some system that would imitate the intelligent behavior of a human, and then you can hire the person who will do the proper bookkeeping of your customers' personal data, and that's why you're sitting on huge chunks of data, because nobody can keep up. But if you can employ AI just to run your business to some extent, maybe interact with the users or interact with the user database by alone. So I'm talking about a very mundane thing, is that most personal data gets stored and retained for an overly long time, just because nobody is there with the mental capacity to delete just the things that they don't need and keep just the things that they need. So they just keep everything. So that's just like a very particular example of how the lack of manpower, and that means in this case intelligent agents, causing these problems. And so if AI can step up as such an intelligent AI agent, then you can have some progress in that question.
Cool. I have this wonderful, yes, Péter, go ahead.
Terry, so I asked me because of my mathematical background or computer science background, and I forgot to mention that, of course, AI is heavily used in any privacy preserving investigation or in data security investigation. So currently, AI techniques, for example, are primary technologies to test the security of a system, because we can automate the testing and various attacks can be emulated. So of course, AI from a technological point of view are definitely the primary answer for improving privacy and security.
Wonderful. I have actually a very interesting question from this wonderful lady. She is an advocate at the Supreme Court in India, Divya Dwivedi. You cannot see the name of the person. It's just a StreamYard issue. So I'm just so Divya has asked a very good question, and she's also participating in several of AI ethics sort of boards, and I've seen her do some wonderful work, and slowly she's doing a lot of investigative work as well as an advocate working at Supreme Court. So this is her question. I know it's a really super loaded question. I would help you guys with it. So perhaps the first question is philosophical. So I will ask Mishi if you can answer that. And Péter, if you can answer the second part of this question.
Yeah, well, so first of all, I think it is a widespread reception of what is going on, that we are progressing at such a fast pace that somehow we are losing our ethics and morality. Again, I always push back a little bit on that, because I don't think we are more amoral or unethical than we used to be before as a human race, because true, it's fast and it's hard to keep up, but also, for instance, what we can thank to technology is information and images from all sorts of places around the globe. So there is an awareness. If you are interested in one kind of problem, should it be racism, should it be natural disasters, anything else, you can learn about that. So we kind of, and of course it's not universal, but we kind of well, maybe created the potential. I mean, we, our intellectual predecessors, created the potential through these technologies by which we can connect the internet and the others, to learn about stuff and not hide things. So it's very not easy for, I don't know, an imaginary dictator somewhere to hide. I mean, it's not impossible, but it's very interesting that you can see that things, the people that the global audience as a whole, we learn about most of the things, it seems. And of course, you can't be sure because you don't know what you don't know. But so certainly there is potential there, and then I don't see why we couldn't safeguard our ethics and morality, maybe even better than before, and be more peaceful and inclusive.
Thank you. That's a very good answer, Michi. Péter, the second part.
Well, it's another challenging question, but I would cite again and then confirm this view that AI is a kind of modern microscope or telescope to mankind, and if we use it properly, we can collect and interpret data which was simply not available before. And if you have this infrastructure that the individuals with any background can access at proper level this higher level data, so we really tailor this system to learn from it, then as Michi mentioned, this idea that all the boats will be lifted. So hopefully the general science, so all the investigations that we are currently doing, starting from clinical trials to all the psychological studies, for example, which are seriously biased to, for example, starting from genetics. You know that the current genetics is not diverse enough. If you go to psychology, again, the psychological studies are heavily dominated by certain populations. So if you can somehow broaden the scope of data collection, if we can replace the very focused clinical trials to ambient assisted living like data collection, where we can observe the effect of drugs at home in a natural environment in real usage, it will really change the whole picture of mankind, and the scientific data will be different. So I think it's essential to have these challenges that we have to keep the scope as broad as possible, and trustworthiness comes from transparency in a sense that the participants can access proper level of data. And this pressure, of course, not even myself will investigate all the aspects of this data because of limited time and so on and so forth, but the possibility that anybody can access a proper portion of this data is a serious pressure on accountability, and this kind of openness is crucial. So I think all the boats will be lifted. Idea is a good answer to say that heterogeneity will help us in many respects.
I think it's a fantastic question. You're absolutely right. There have been many discussions in healthcare. I believe I must apologize for not exact percentage of the number that I may give, but I've understood that almost 80% of the data on certain medical pathologies are from male versus female, except there are other gynecological issues or something where obviously you require data from female. So even in terms of the gender diversity, the models, the algorithms that are being generated are purely based on primarily Northwestern Europe, Northwestern part of the world that is largely dominating a much wider. So you're absolutely right. The homogeneity is a huge problem, and heterogeneity, and then eventually going into and regionality is where the diversity can be and will be addressed and should be addressed, in my opinion. Otherwise, we are still actually having this nice kumbaya dance with each other. I still think it's super nascent, super early. In the next 10, 20 years, there'll be far better understanding of not just objective aspects in healthcare, but also subjective aspects, for example, in Peru or some region in Guatemala. And then that's how I think the maturity of AI is going to come, that we are not just focused on a bunch of guys, which one company in Silicon Valley grabbed data, made people collect data, annotate data, and then suddenly said, yay, I mean, accuracy is 99%, precision, recall scores are great, and I'm going to the investors to raise money. And as you can know, I mean, the wealth managers are super excited. They're taking companies to billion-dollar valuations within months. It's almost as if people are in a hurry to grab this AI ecosystem. But again, I have two more questions. I think one is a compliment to you, gentlemen, which I should share with you. So I think, thank you, Emmanuel. Finally, at least I can see your picture. I also see Péter Hanak, our colleague, has a question. So thank you, Emmanuel. Really appreciate your kind words. Together, as Michi also mentioned, yes, that's why we have embarked on this mission to do our best in whatever that we can do as a group of individuals from a few universities, research labs, and startups in this 10-party consortium, which this Human-Centered AI Masters, a wonderful master's program is. I hope it will be, because we're so passionate, and you have just met these two passionate, extremely intelligible, but passionate individuals. A last question from our own colleague, Péter. He obviously always asks very good but difficult questions. So let's see what Péter has to say. And perhaps maybe I'll let Michi answer this, and then we can close this call. It's been a wonderful 1-hour conversation, and I wish I could go on for a longer period. Michi, if you can close this call with this, answering this question Péter has.
Oh, sure. So I don't think awareness raising is a primary task for anybody anymore. I mean, there couldn't be more awareness, sometimes I feel, from the general public, from the students, and from colleagues as well. So this is coming with the hype. So certainly, then you have to concentrate, and to my mind, that's the most important for the masters, to implementable things that you can teach the students, and that's a huge challenge, because I said at the very beginning, the first wave was value-based or virtue-based. First wave of thinking about ethics of AI was virtue-based, and the problem with virtue is that you kind of don't know how to code that sort of things. It's like how a human should behave. So that's an Aristotelian ethics. Yeah. But I'm more hopeful now, because there is a second wave. For instance, if you look at the new AI law that is coming in EU, that changed TAC to a considerable extent, and they started thinking about risk-based assessment of systems, in which they say, you know what, if this is just a computer game and you are doing the AI for the bot, the user is fighting against, well, what can go wrong? But if this system is for sorting CVs at an HR department, you can't do it. You can't do it unless you very much safeguard the whole system, because it's high risk, because it's about people's lives. So this is an example for you on how can you turn something into more concrete and coming down from the very important but still abstract level of values. And so we need to push on that front and go down to the architectural level, in my opinion. And that's some for somebody who is attending a master's.
Wonderful answer. And I hope that as well. I think internally we have so many questions within the consortium, and we kind of, at least my personal opinion is that we are still ahead of this journey, and we will evolve over time. And sure enough, yes, it's going to be more concrete, Péter Hanak, and we want it to be more concrete. I think awareness generation, as you rightly said, probably might have been a bit of overkill. A lot of papers have been published from folks who have left Google. Some have also started their ethical AI companies. So I think we have sufficient information around what's not going right, and how to concretize it and provide technical tools, develop data sets that are curated before you can put them into a system, whether it is hiring a person, judging their behavior, and human-centered, meaning not just a machine, but a human interventionist system that allows us to ethically and in a balanced manner be able to hire that individual, is a better system to do application tracking and candidate screening, etc. So I definitely think technological, let's say, modifications and maintaining human interventionist sort of a combination is what Home Human-Centered AI Masters is. So I think it's fantastic. Thank you very much, Michi. I'm so glad to have had this wonderful conversation with you. And Péter, obviously, you and I had a wonderful discussion also several times. I am myself so excited. I want to obviously meet you, gentlemen, as well. So this wonderful Masters, just for all of you guys, our audience, is going to be, you know, all these wonderful people from the University of Budapest, University of Naples, University in Utrecht, and the University in Dublin, including our research partners. And you see Dr. Oisin Boydell is also a project partner. He's also participated in this conversation. He leads a research lab in Dublin. So we have research partners. We have these wonderful 4 universities, and also startups, ourselves being a startup, and there are 2 other technology companies. So we are trying to provide full 360 degrees view perspective for this Human AI Masters. It will be a very interesting, very heated conversation. I'm sure you will enjoy that AI Masters program as well, because we will be there personally. So you can hold us also to our word that we are providing you valuable information in order to make you professionals that are going with a toolkit in your hand, knowing how to develop AI systems, but also understanding how to inspect and open that tool kit and look under the hood and see if it is a healthy system, and how do we tweak it to make it a little bit more explainable, provable, accountable, and responsible. Thanks very much, both of you gentlemen. Michi, Péter, I really appreciate it. I couldn't have expected this to go any better than how I had imagined. So thanks very much. And thank you, audience, everybody who has been watching. You can watch these videos on our human-centered -AI.eu website. You can just go and take a look at it. Take a look at our masters. By the way, the BME University in Hungary already has the master's program organized. So look up, send us a mail, and we'll respond to you and try to help you answer all your questions that you have regarding this AI Masters program. So thanks, everybody. Thanks, Michi. Thanks, Péter.
Thank you.
Please stay on.
Thanks for the invitation.
I'll stop the broadcast, and we can close this loop.